My name is Brendan Tannum. I'm recording in Dublin, Ireland. I've chosen a piece from the second chapter, Nestor, where Stephen and Mr. Deasy are having a chat and the schoolboys are just outside playing hockey. Mr. Deasy begins pontificating about the thriftiness of the English nation. Then he asks Stephen will he help in getting an article of his published. It's about foot and mouth disease. Then Deasy launches into an anti Semitic rant, to which Stephen fairly reasonably replies to every charge against him. Well, aren't we all like that? And it's not enough for Deasy, and he goes on to this stereotypical portrait of the Jews as Shylock or the Jew of Malta hoarding his gold in his vault. So with that intro done, I'll get on with the reading.
Mark my words, Mr. Daedalus, he said. England is in the hands of the Jews, in all the highest places, her finance, her press, and they're the signs of a nation's decay. Wherever they gather, they eat up the nation's vital strength. I have seen it coming these years. As sure as we're standing here, the Jew merchants are already at their work of destruction. Old England is dying. He stepped swiftly off, his eyes coming to blue life as they passed a broad sunbeam. He faced about and back again. Dying, he said again, if not dead by now. The harlot's cry from street to street shall weave old England's winding sheet. His eyes, open wide in vision, stared sternly across the sunbeam in which he halted. A merchant, Stephen said, is one who buys cheap and sells dear, Jew or Gentile, is he not? They sinned against the light, Mr. Deasy said gravely, and you can see the darkness in their eyes, and that is why they are wanderers on the earth to this day. On the steps of the Paris Stock Exchange, the gold-skinned men quoting prices on their gemmed fingers. Gabble of geese. They swarmed loud, uncouth about the temple, their heads thick plotting under maladroit silk hats. Not theirs, these clothes, this speech, these gestures. Their full, slow eyes belied the words, the gestures eager and unoffending, but knew the rancours massed about them, and knew their zeal was vain, vain patience to heap and hoard. Time surely would scatter all, a hoard heaped by the roadside, plundered and passing on. Their eyes knew their years of wandering, and patient knew the dishonours of their flesh. Who has not? Stephen said. What do you mean? Mr. Deasy asked. He came forward a pace and stood by the table. His under jaw fell sideways open uncertainly. Is this old wisdom? He waits to hear from me. History, Stephen said, is a nightmare from which I am trying to awake. From the playfield the boys raised a shout, a whirring whistle. Goal! What if that nightmare gave you a back kick? The ways of the Creator are not our ways, Mr. Deasy said. All human history moves towards one great goal, the manifestation of God. Stephen jerked his thumb outside the window, saying, That is God.
Hooray! Aye! Hooray! What? Mr. Deasy asked. A shout in the street, Stephen answered, shrugging his shoulders. Mr. Deasy looked down and held for a while the wings of his nose, tweaked between his fingers. Looking up again, he set them free. I am happier than you are, he said. We have committed many errors and many sins. A woman brought sin into the world, for a woman who was no better than she should be. Helen, the runaway wife of Menelaus. 10 years the Greeks made war on Troy. A faithless wife first brought the strangers to our shore here. Macmurra's wife and her leman O'Rourke, Prince of Breffni. A woman, too, brought Parnell low. Many errors, many failures, but not the one sin. I am a struggler now at the end of my days. but I will fight for the right till the end. For Ulster will fight, and Ulster will be right. Stephen raised the sheets in his hand. Well, sir, he began. I foresee, Mr. Deasy said, that you will not remain here very long at this work. You were not born to be a teacher, I think. Perhaps I am wrong. A learner, rather, Stephen said. And here, what will you learn more? Mr. Deasy shook his head. Who knows, he said. To learn one must be humble, but life is the great teacher. Stephen rustled the sheets again. As regards these, he said. Yes, Mr. Deasy said. You have 2 copies there, if you can have them published at once. Telegraph, Irish Homestead. I will try, Stephen said, and let you know tomorrow. I know 2 editors slightly. That will do, Mr. Deasy said briskly. I wrote last night to Mr. Field MP. There is a meeting of the Cattle Traders Association today at the City Arms Hotel. I asked him to lay my letter before the meeting. You see if you can get it into your 2 papers. What are they? The Evening Telegraph. That will do, Mr. Deasy said. There is no time to lose. Now I have to answer that letter from my cousin. Good morning, sir, Stephen said, putting the sheets in his pocket. Thank you. Not at all, Mr. Deasy said, as he searched the papers on his desk. I like to break a lance with you, old as I am. Good morning, sir, Stephen said again, bowing to his bent back. He went out by the open porch and down the gravel path under the trees, hearing the cries of voices and the crack of sticks from the playfield. The lions couchant on the pillars as he passed out through the gate, toothless terrors. Still, I will help him in his fight. Mulligan will dub me a new name, the Bullock Befriending Bard. Mr. Daedalus! Running after me. No more letters, I hope. Just one moment. Yes, sir, Stephen said, turning back at the gate. Mr. Deasy halted, breathing hard and swallowing his breath. I just wanted to say, he said, Ireland, they say, has the honour of being the only country which never persecuted the Jews. Do you know that? No. And do you know why? He frowned sternly on the bright air. Why, sir? Stephen asked, beginning to smile. Because she never let them in, Mr. Deasy said solemnly. A cough ball of laughter leaped from his throat, dragging after it a rattling chain of phlegm. He turned back quickly, coughing, laughing, his lifted arms waving to the air. She'll never let them in, he cried again, through his laughter as he stamped on gaitered feet over the gravel of the path. That's why. On his wise shoulders, through the checker work of leaves, the sun flung spangles, dancing coins.